Well, it seems like maybe as a way to dive into talking about like you guys as a group. I mean, even before Eric, before you got out, we were talking about how Jack's in New Zealand and how all three of you are always sort of balancing the various workloads that exist in an artist project. And obviously you're in three different places in the world. I mean, can you talk, this is a very general way to start, but sort of anything that comes to mind about how you've learned to balance a workload in a group, especially when you're not all in the same place, especially as things get bigger, there's more business going on, you're trying to maintain momentum while also, maintaining some sense of individuality and personal life and all of that. Like, what has that journey been for you guys?
I feel like it's just evolved. And I think when we started Ternion Sound, like education and thoughtfulness and intention were all parts of like what we were trying to do. And what's interesting is that I didn't expect us to evolve. You know what I mean? I guess sound-wise, sure, because genres, vibes change. But I didn't expect where we lived, our process, things we knew would change. And so it's just like, I think every 2 years, someone could ask us that question and we'll be adding like little additions to it, especially as the group itself grows too, like we used to have to solve certain problems, like getting an out-of-state booking or like getting the first track signed, making connections, of course, like all the things that people always have to go through or whatever. And now we're not concerned about things like that. And like, sorry, this is like a long tangent, but so I teach a lot of private lesson students or whatever, and we do a lot of like Twitch streams where people ask us questions. We have a Discord, and it reminds me of what it's like to be in that world. But as an example of how my world is completely different than theirs, I can hit up certain people that we've released tracks with and say, I'd like to do a 4-tracker. Here's half of one of the 4 tracks, and they'll sign it. You know what I mean? They'll say like, okay, give me the rest of the tracks. And they'll already put together like artwork and like a deadline because they know we can pull it off and we have that rapport. And there's no way in hell you would do that as an up-and-coming artist. You know what I mean? That's not even close to possible. In fact, I tell my up-and-coming artists, don't send labels things that aren't finished usually, because then they're like, that's the song I want. Why'd you change it? You know what I mean? So it's a completely different... but yeah, as far as the specifics, maybe Eric could get into that too. But yeah.
I think...
Yeah, go ahead.
A lot of it has to do like, balancing workload. We've continued to kind of lean into what our own individual strengths are. Yeah. So for example, Jack has always been a fantastic sound designer, and he also has sort of built his life around really wanting to be able to continue to tour as much as possible and get out and see the world if he can. And so that's kind of put him in a place right now where, he's doing this international tour for us and, just like working on sound design and writing in the meantime. I think I've always been very DJ centric as far as our group goes, and trying to be working with, continuing to keep our network relationships strong with our peers and labels and everything. So then that has me like running our radio show and being in control of sending out music and trading things. And then Andrew has always emphasized wanting to stay at home more often so that he can handle more of the writing. Mm-hmm. And so it's just, we always kind of knew what we wanted as far as our personal responsibilities. And then we just continued to balance all that out with each other to make sure that we're still handling everything that needs to get done. But each person who's the best at their job, that's specifically what they're doing within the group too.
Well, I was just gonna say there's bleed, of course. There's like, hey, I need help doing that or something like that. But even with like going out to shows, like I think a big thing for 2024 is that we're trying to improve our quality of life inside the project. And I think that's a very common thing, like any startup business or something like that. Usually founders and whatever are putting in those 80 hours all the time. It's constantly on your mind. You're always worrying about it. And it's very easy for a music project to be like that because there's not a lot of money and it's a really hard thing to do with a lot of competition. So I think now part of our leaning into all these things is to just like let other people not do certain things so we can try to get a little bit more balance. But that's just what I was going to add.
No, yeah. Well, that makes me want to ask what needed improvement? What were the trouble spots that you're trying to focus on now?
It's interesting because I think our appetite to grow creates new challenges. So I don't necessarily see a lot of problems per se, but I do see challenges and projects that we like to take on. And I guess problems could also come from like big ideas, revolutionizing the fairness of pay inside of the underground scene or the EDM scene, like taking on large issues and stuff like that. And I think it's really important to have large issues so that you are shooting for something grand and distant, as kind of a focusing thing. But yeah, I don't know. We do a lot of guessing and checking. But
yeah. Which
I have like a more specific point to kind of hone in on as far as like here's something that we did and now we're trying to improve upon for this year. So last year we played 86 shows in total, and that's us doing, 2 North American full tours in the spring and the fall and festivals in the summer. And for this year going forward, what we're trying to do is basically think about how things went last year and previous to that and kind of trim the fat, so to speak. How can we make our shows feel better for everyone involved, the production company, the audience, and ourselves? How can we make it more special and something that's more exciting for everybody? It feels like when you start getting into being a touring artist, there's going to be a lot of, you just want to get your name out and play as many shows as you can so that people understand, like, this is who you are, this is what you sound like. And we've been touring for a lot of years all of a sudden. And now it feels like we're trying to focus more on, we have a wonderful following and a lot of support from, audience members, and we have a lot of good people that we're working with on music and labels. So how can we use this to, balance out making a better experience? And hopefully, I'd like to play less shows, but have them be better than the year before. Yep. So that's like a growing problem. Not a problem, but it's not that we want to do.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great goal, I think, in general, because it's so easy to kind of get in the grind of just saying yes to every show, because obviously that's the money in most cases. That's the bulk of it. And so you want to maximize those opportunities. But it's something I think a lot of younger artists can't conceive of right away, that can in the long term actually be harmful if you're just out there all the time with sort of no plan beyond keep going,
Mm-hmm. I think that's a really interesting thing. And that's, I don't have a fully formed thought about this, but something I'm trying to write down right now, if I'm journaling or writing notes or whatever, I just get ideas, is like, what are the different metagames? And where's Ternion Sound, and where are my students and things like that, or anybody we're talking to in Discord? And I think a mistake that's commonly made, especially when you're on the come up, or you're like, I'm going to take music seriously, I'm going to start learning and blah, 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 is you emulate late game players. And you don't need to be doing late game things. You need to be doing early game things. Early game things are like what we were talking about before we recorded, was like, the 24 hours after a new track comes out, you flip it. Those kind of things. You're cold emailing so many things. You're playing shows for very little money. You're sleeping on people's couches. You're doing all this kind of stuff. Like, there's early game tactics, and then there's middle game tactics, later game tactics, and it just keeps changing. And like, I think that's really important in and of itself. And then at the same time, as far as Ternion Sound, or at least my own like passions, is that I keep wanting to dive in a little deeper. Not just because I think it's important to like keep growing and learning, but like, the more we figure out with our ethical compass and stuff like that, and the more we dive into these things, the less ignorant we are about the realities of the scene and the culture and all these kind of things and how things work. And it makes us be able to do things now that we have this knowledge in ways that we think are important. And it helps us also relay that information to people so they are not under false pretenses on how to move forward and stuff like that. So it's very, very interesting. And I feel like a lot of times we are in these situations where we're shaking hands with the devil. And it's like, as long as I'm eyes wide open and we walk away from a lot of these things, it's very interesting. But at the same time, it's like, but I want to know. I want to know what's going on. You know?
Well, I mean, you mentioned earlier that when you guys formed Ternion Sound, like right at the very beginning, that already you were thinking about some of these issues in terms of intentionality and having, you know, an ethical standpoint or at least perspective of some kind. And I wanted to ask you about that because, I mean, I'm sure you know this better than anyone, but I mean, that's, I think, very rare especially at the start of a project to really be thinking about it holistically that way, if that makes sense. Like, what is that just your guys' personalities? Was that just like a natural thing where you're like, obviously, this is something that we're already thinking about? Or was there something going on that sort of led you to think about these issues early on?
I was just start by saying Ternion Sound wasn't our first efforts, basically. So I think that's how it naturally came about. Because I don't know, unless you listen to this and you're 16 and you think it's the most effective way to start a project, you know, like if you have a mentor, maybe you'd get there. But it's because we all had different projects ahead of time to varying degrees of playing different shows and things like that. And so when we came together, we were actually solving a problem. I don't know if Eric, if you want to talk a little bit about that. One problem being terrible sound systems.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's one good example there is that, you know, most of our individual solo projects before we did Ternion Sound were playing a lot heavier music and, you know, being amongst that scene. And Andrew definitely went and played, you know, the biggest shows and was like out and had more releases and we all kind of met in the Minneapolis scene. But a lot of, you know, there's a big part of that we were all kind of upset about, which was basically within the scene that we were playing in, there just wasn't really an emphasis on people booking good sound at the shows. It was just, you would go out and play a venue for, you know, some garage center rental sound system. And it was always so unsatisfying because I think also at that point in time, we had all personally experienced some incredible sound systems. Mm-hmm. And that really set a new standard for us. And so it was kind of realizing like, well, if we go a different route and make different music than this, that's going to surround us with some different personalities and hopefully just better sound and like move in a different direction for all that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good starting point, at least for this.
Well, was it? So, I mean, that makes sense because I think anyone who's ever DJ'd knows the frustration of being limited by the sound system you're playing on and not feeling like you're able to execute how you think it should sound in your head. All that kind of stuff makes total sense. Was it also, so when you say you were playing heavier music, are we talking about like more aggressive dubstep kind of stuff?
Yes.
They're out, bro step.
Yeah.
Yeah.
OG rhythms.
Machine gun step. Gull step. All the steps.
Yeah. All the fake names people make
all
up.
The steps were stepped. But also just to elaborate on this a little more, and I think a bit more of what you were asking too. There was, I think, already a part of us that existed that wanted to, you know, take a longer and harder route through the new project with, you know, within the music industry, political landscape, so to speak. And it's funny you bring up like thinking about that from the beginning. It's something I haven't thought about for quite a while because we're so ingrained in like trying to make calculated decisions now about who we're working with and where we're playing. But it's nice to also be reminded like that we've been doing that since the group was formed already. I do want to credit Jack a lot because he is the most politically brained person I've ever known. And if he was here, he would also say, like, yes, this has fully been an intention from the beginning. The more knowledge that we've gained throughout like playing shows and being in the music industry is just like the knowledge comes at a heavy cost at the same time, because it's like, okay, it now appears that there is a pipeline that people, you know, that they want you to follow to be a big artist, and it's up to you to decide, like, you know, what kind of moves do you make for your own project. And sometimes it's really frustrating because we feel like we're trying to like pave a new path within all that.
Yeah.
And it also, like, this is just us thinking amongst ourselves. And a lot of the general audience is just, people don't know that any of this exists at all.
Yeah.
And they just see like, oh, well, this guy's playing this Redbox headline show. But why aren't these people over here? I don't know. It's like this, a lot of this is all, you know, calculated decisions about who you're working with and why. But yeah, I think we've had that kind of mindset since we started too.
I was gonna say too, it's like a little bit, and I don't want us to come off as like this like high whatever thought or high ego or anything like that. But I think if you want to hold the music as high up as your project and the scene too, you have to make choices that aren't just you focused in a lot of ways. You know what I mean? And I think I'm always trying to push us in a direction of win-win-wins. And I think that's like probably like a utopia or whatever. But like better sound system means that the music will be better represented, which means that people will have a much better experience. And that was actually a big deal back in the day, because a lot of the theory around why people weren't liking some of the deeper stuff in the States is because our sound systems were shit. You know what I mean? So like, you need a well-rounded, deep, warm sound system in a room with some thought behind it, with an engineer who can mix the system to represent these tracks. And then when they're represented well, your mind is blown. You know what I mean? Yeah. And like, so that was like an initial thing we were trying to tackle. And I think that at the same time, working really hard to create those things as non-starters, like it must be this way and blah, 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 also takes our project and makes it better too and more valuable. So that's where I'm talking about a win-win. So I'm hoping that it's a long-term site thing, but I'm hoping that everybody's making more money and having a better time through these principles, and they're the right thing to do. That's always what I'm trying to do, you know? Yeah. And I think we circle back around to that a lot. And I will also put in a disclaimer. We've done a lot of, like, there's a lot of mistakes. We've done a lot of things wrong, of course. And I try to be very upfront about that. We all talk about our mistakes and things like that. So don't pedestal us, because when we fall, it'll hurt more. But like, yeah. So that's kind of like a bit of the ethos, I think, because I don't want anybody to get twisted and for people to think that we're just like all message and I don't know.
No. But it's interesting because I think there's like hearing you guys talk about this is my wheels are turning a little. And I think there's probably a little irony too, in that at a certain point, doing things from a, you know, if I do pedestal you for a second, like the like ideal you guys doing things from a pure intention and motive and really trying to do everything the right way. I think the irony is that becomes the brand in a way, and then that becomes the marketable thing, in the same way that the people all the way on the other end of the spectrum who are marketing themselves in a totally different way, but marketing nonetheless, you know, it's like, it's just a funny thing that I think, I don't know, for any young people listening, it's like, you don't have to be shitty to market yourself, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
I guess that's
You're totally right. You're totally right. And that's exactly why I'm throwing out disclaimers. And that's why I try to do posts every once in a while about our fuck ups and stuff and our mistakes, because I don't want that. Jack doesn't want that. Eric doesn't want that. Oh my God. Could you imagine living that life? Yeah. The tightrope of being perfect and like, we're above thou and all that kind of stuff. No way.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because I think in the scene in general, you tell me, because you guys are closer to the underground than I am. You know, if I've been associated with any scene, it's, I think, a bit more the overground EDM scene over the years. And in that realm, it's weird sometimes to even talk about these issues, let alone have a strong stance on them, let alone try to change anything. You know what I mean? I guess I don't know exactly what my point is, other than to ask you, like, you know, because Eric, you were mentioning before, like, somebody who may not have the inside baseball view on this can look at a bunch of artists, not necessarily see the subtle distinctions. You guys sometimes say you play a festival and you're on a lineup with people who you might consider part of your scene or your crew, and a bunch of people you don't consider part of your scene or your crew or your movement. But to the outside observer, it's just like you play at 3 p.m., the next person plays at 4. You know, it's like kind of all flattened, all the same. Do you see yourselves as part of any particular scene, style? Is it weird to play on a mixed bill like that? Because, you know, you do interact with the larger systems on a fairly regular basis. So, like, how do you see yourself fitting in?
It's interesting. I think a lot of the times it does feel sort of alien in a way, because it seems to exist, like there is this separation between the way the music sounds and the artist projects themselves. I mean, at the end of the day, when you're at the show, everything's great. We're all just people. I think I'm just thinking a lot more about the inside mentality of what that's like for us too. Yeah. And trying to make the right moves to be where we want to be. I wouldn't say that we like feel completely like, you know, they are them and we are us kind of thing, because again, we're all doing music and out and playing shows at the same time. So there's all these common roots between all of our projects. I think the end goals for us, we know what ours are, and I think that they're kind of different. If I had to guess, I don't know what everyone else's really wants to do with their project, but what I can say is that what we want to do is continue to be transparent and educational and like build community and try and make things better for everybody.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot of different routes you could take from this. You know what I mean? I think in general, a lot of bigger artists, I think, are ignorant of the process, like how the sausage is made a lot of times. And what happens is, and we have real examples of this that I am not comfortable relaying because I'm also like a hearsay. I try to like stay out of a lot of it. But so abuse happens, or just bad business, or a lot of certain things. And the artist that's technically perpetuating it doesn't really realize it's happening, you know? And it is also hard probably to see a problem when you're getting handed $50,000 to $100,000 checks for playing a show and stuff like that. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like that covers over a lot of sins because you're just like, this is great. I'm doing something right now. Finally, people are giving me the value that I think my music has. I must be correct, you know, and things like that. So that's always there. And I think us unpacking that is just trying to keep the scene healthy so that more people can be at the table. And so bubbles don't happen and stuff like that, you know. But I wanted to give another example of like being in the scene-ish. So our album came out on a bunch of different platforms. And just as like a very quick synopsis for anybody who doesn't know, it's called Digital Artifice, and it came out on Vision, which is Noisy's record label. So we're very proud of that and very excited. But the album is intended to be consumed in two different ways. When you go to streaming services, as a listener, we're expecting when you want to check out our album for enjoyment, it plays end to end, and it mixes itself entirely for about an hour or so. I forget now. You cannot, until recently, because we've released like extended versions, you could not listen to the individual tracks as a regular consumer. And we did that to great peril because it was a pain to pull off. But we also did that very intentionally because, you know, it's not even argumentative to say that a song with a 1 minute kick drum intro into the drop is not fun to listen to by itself. It's meant to be mixed. So we took a problem and we took a platform that everybody uses and we tried to do our thing, square peg round hole into Spotify, So I think that's a good example of like our interaction with these platforms. And then just to complete the story, basically, we sold the tracks for DJs to play, / like the collectors. So you could go on Bandcamp and get all the extended versions of the track. It's usually got a second drop. It's DJable, all that kind of stuff, slight differences or whatever. But that's, I think, one of the coolest capsules of like where we pulled something off with our intentionality, which is just extremely difficult with all the moving parts. But we're like, look, there's an incongruent nature of EDM tracks to Spotify. How are we going to reconcile this in a way that honors the project and the music and the history? And that was our attempt. And I think we did pretty good there. But I think you could extrapolate that out, and that's what we're attempting to do.
Right. Yeah. That's the metaphor for how you're trying to operate in general. Yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect. And first of all, the album Digital Artifice is really great. I really like it. And I had the same experience. I listened to it all the way through a couple days ago. And exactly like you were saying, prior to that, I hadn't heard the whole album as a piece. I had some tracks on promo and all that, but I never sat and had the whole mixed experience. And it's so good. And the way, this is kind of on just a DJ nerd tip, but like the way it's mixed together, the way it transitions from track to track, and oftentimes, tempo to tempo or style to style. Any DJ who's wondering about how to make their transitions better, how to do it artfully, it's really well done. People could learn a lot from it. I really liked, I happen to be doing like a thing I'm mixing together right now too, and it was inspirational. It was great. You did a great job. The whole thing, loved it. And I want to talk a little bit more about that album in a second. But before I get there, because I think this will tie in a little, hard right turn for 1 second. I want to ask you guys, early days, before Ternion Sound, before the project, before Ternion Sound, like going back to kids, basically, if you can, and again, super broad, no wrong answer here, but if you can paint a picture in a couple minutes of who you were as a kid and kind of the music that was around you and sort of the, those early memories where you're a kid, you hear something, it activates something, you don't know why. Like if you have any of those memories and kind of just like, who were you? Who was the kid who became you?
Eric, who the hell are you?
I don't know anymore.
That's the one question by 86.
Dark Path. I forgot all of it. No, for me, I mean, musically as a kid too, I remember being surrounded when I was really little. Actually, this is funny. Both of my brothers were DJs of different genres.
Okay.
My
older or younger?
Oldest brother, Andrew, all older than me. Okay. I'm the youngest. And so I looked up to all of them very much. And my oldest brother, Andrew, he was actually involved in like rave culture already. And to me, it was just techno because I had no idea the difference between any of these genres.
Wait, sorry, let me interrupt you for 1 second. Was he,
yes,
just because I'm a little older as well, was he playing out at like local? I'm wondering if I saw your brother DJ back in the day.
I mean, I'm trying to remember the name of his exact crew, but they were doing warehouse parties and he was playing like drum and bass and happy hardcore. And
then I almost definitely saw him.
Yeah, I would not be surprised.
Jack go through, because his company was Uncensored US, right?
Yeah.
And they threw some rays. They threw the Summer Breeze, if you were there around. I mean, that's when I was kind of getting around there.
Yeah, I was. I mean, I moved out of Minnesota in the year 2000. So my like big raving years were like 97 to 2000 there.
Eric's brother then probably.
Yeah.
Well, before Jack.
Was he, I swear if it was this dude, I'm going to flip out. Was he... There's a jungle MC named Brace, MC Brace, And
my brother worked with Brace many times.
so I
yes.
almost guarantee it's your
Brace
brother.
and Hyde, and yeah, dude.
I guess you're
That's
welcome
wild.
for the Bookerman family.
Oh, my
Bringing us all
God.
here today.
Yeah,
Yep.
I just can't remember the name of their crew, but I think I know the crew you're talking about. That's wild. Yeah.
That's super cool. So there was definitely influence from that, and just like kind of hearing some of that music. And then my other brother Alex, he had like a little hip hop crew, so he was like the turntablist, doing hip hop records. And so hearing like old Beastie Boys and the Roots and a lot of like classic hip hop beats. And then for me, I just went totally off the rails with music, and was because I was a drummer and have been for a very long time. So my friends and I were into, like, started with punk and rock, and then it just got darker and heavier continuously until for me, I was just all like technical death metal and gent and like the hardest, fastest, whatever I could find. That was the most interesting thing for me. And then there was like a hard right turn when my friend Luke, who was our bassist, showed me some really old, really wobbly robot sounding dubstep. And it was like, I have never heard anything like this before. It's electronic, but I have no idea how any of these sounds are generated. And to me, it was slow and low, just like all this dubstep or this death metal that I was listening to was. It had that like breakdown feel to it.
Yeah.
And all of the bass, which was still already like one of my favorite parts of metal shows, was when the drummer would hit that 808 pad and the whole club would, that was like the power. That was like the power moment.
Yeah.
So they just got to do that all the time. And so then after that, started going to some shows, bought a DJ controller, started tinkering around in GarageBand. And from then on was like, just continuously following, how do people make this? How can I do this more?
What age are we talking about when all of this started
This
happening?
is for me at the very end of high school is when I started listening to electronic music. And then I went up to college, and then it was like, I want to do this all the time.
Were you going to
After
college
that.
in Minnesota as well?
Yeah, I went to UMD.
Okay.
Up in Duluth. And that's where I like played my first parties, and then came back down to the cities. And at that point, I had seen Andrew Hill play a show. So I was in the audience, actually, and seeing him and Jack like start to play shows. And I was like, I got to know who that guy is. Who's that guy? He's really good. And I found out, Andrew's a local, actually. And he has a club that he's hosting at this music school.
R.I.P.
I know, right? Yeah.
Oh, wow,
McNally
yeah.
Smith broke. Plug those guys for that song. That's
right. Yeah.
But yeah, McNally Smith is where Andrew was actively attending school, and getting a degree in music production, which to me was like, I didn't know that you could even go to college for any of this until found some other people doing it. And so Andrew was actually letting me into the college to go to the club before I was attending the college.
Nice.
And from then on, I've basically just been following Andrew's footsteps more than 10 years.
Taste of me around.
Is McNally Smith, is that the same spot? Did you guys know the Boombox Cartel guys? Is that where they went?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah,
I
that's what I
actually
thought.
lived with them for a while as well.
Oh, okay, nice.
Yep.
That's awesome. I love those guys, man. Yeah, good buddies.
Mm-hmm.
But okay, interesting. So Andrew, maybe walk me towards McNally Smith then. What took you there?
Yeah, well, addicted to music as a child, and I'll skip through some of that. But
What kind of music? That's my only question as a kid.
So my brother is 8 years older than me, and I would just steal his CDs basically. And so he was really into he's pretty eclectic actually, but like ska, punk, rock, new metal, hybrid kind of stuff a little bit. And then I liked Ben Folds, but only his CD where it's just him playing piano, because piano is my instrument.
Okay.
I liked his rock take on that, and all the things about him that makes him awesome. But Muse, System of a Down, Slipknot, things like that
Hell yeah.
were I was really into. But I just didn't even think about electronic music at all. It was all rock or piano or traditional instruments or anything like that. And then on Black Friday in high school, my dad, my brother, and I waited outside of a Best Buy just to like have the Black Friday experience once. And I think we both bought Dual 18 subwoofers because they were on sale. And the night before, I went on LimeWire and I downloaded any songs with the word bass in it because I was just like, I'm going to need songs with low end. I'm getting subwoofers.
Wait, you and your dad both bought subwoofers?
My dad and my brother.
Oh,
my dad just
brother.
came along.
Okay.
Yep. Or me and my brother. Yeah.
I got you.
My dad just came along with us. But and I must have seen like a magazine ad that I knew that this was going to be there at Best Buy. And the song that I found that blew my mind and changed my life forever is Drum Sound and Simon Bassline Smith Junglist, the Twisted Individual remix.
I know that too.
Yeah, it's
straight into the deep end.
Tune. Yeah, wow. And that song changed my life. Honestly, it really did. Because the energy leading up to that moment, I think this is sophomore year of high school, was I wanted to be in bands. And so what I would do is I would learn all the instruments for different songs or bands. And I would try to teach my friends how to play those instruments. And I kept thinking like, if I could just write music, just me, I wouldn't have to ask anybody to practice. I wouldn't have to do any of this. Found electronic music. And then a little final funny story about electronic music is that, so I got addicted to it. I was figuring out how to write it. I was using Adobe Audition and I was using FL, eventually FL Studio. But I found DJ mixes. And I was like, drum and bass is the coolest genre I've ever heard. This is so cool. And these writers are insane. They're writing hour-long dynamic songs. How do they do this? So I used to try to write DJ mixes from scratch, basically. So my first songs are like 16 minutes long, like, because I just didn't understand that there was mixing happening.
A new challenge.
Yeah, you were trying to write one 60-minute continuous track. Yeah.
I did. I tried. I was just like, these guys are nuts. And then how do they keep doing this?
Yeah. Just every DJ mix is like one person's opus. Yeah.
Yeah. But I basically, I think the reason I fell in love with it is because not only were they writing music, they were writing instruments to then write the music with the instruments. And I thought that was like the coolest thing. Me in Manitowoc, Wisconsin, where no one else was basically listening to any electronic music. And then basically end of high school, like I've had full intentions to go to college, but I knew music was going to be the thing I'm going for. So I was like, I got to find a college that's going to somehow help me. Like my parents will be okay with me learning electronic music and I can figure it out. And McNally was the best fit for me. And the rest is history there.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive, man. And it makes me want to ask also kind of what the Minnesota scene was like at the time, because I've known it, when I was a teenager there, then I moved away. And then when I came back, it was more as like a touring artist. And, I just like, there is a big bass community there these days, but I'm kind of wondering for you guys, especially around the time when you make the decision to join up and form Ternion Sound, was there much of a precedent for like that underground bass sound that you were doing? Because when I think about Minneapolis scene, what I think about is obviously techno, and then more, there's like an EDM bass, like kind of the more aggressive stuff we were talking about earlier. I think a pretty strong scene for that too. Was there a precedent for the more underground stuff as well, or were you guys kind of outliers?
I think we each have a different story, and I think that's good. It would be good for a nice diversity inside the scenes, you know what I mean? But like for me, like my first concert ever that I went to, other than like my brother playing a state fair, was Rusko at the Loft. And I think bass music, when Skrillex did his thing, and it was the early Rusko days and it just took over like the globe. Yeah. I think every major city all of a sudden kind of like formed into this like, oh, bass music's crazy and cool now. And that's kind of like, I guess, the zeitgeist that I entered into. And I was just coming from a very reserved, very don't go out to shows background. So I was going to like First Av's record room to see Concrete Jungle, play their drum and bass nights and stuff like that. I didn't go to any of the raves. I didn't even know about the raves and stuff like that. You know what I mean? And I think just the end of that part, this is even before, this is like when I was going up to undergrad, so much before Ternion Sound, we had a solid group of DJs who would go out to the weeklies and the open decks at Barfly and stuff like that. We'd go to the loft and we'd see shows. And I really loved that community. And one thing I really loved about that community too is that we all, I think, positively challenged each other to kick ass. And I think for a while, I was comfortably, I was touring around the United States a little bit. I was comfortably telling people that Minneapolis DJs were better than most of the DJs I saw. Because when dubstep was a new thing, people didn't even know a double drop existed. People didn't know much about blending. They were still doing like hip hop style or something, or wedding DJ or like house style, where it's just like, and the last 30 seconds mixes into this 30 seconds, and like not even thinking about. And the perspective I was coming from was Andy C and Chrissy Chris doing like 1,200 deck mixes and stuff like that,
Yeah.
And so we were all sharing really cool ideas, even outside of, it wasn't all dubstep. It wasn't all drum and bass. There's trance, there's house, there's techno, there's all this kind of stuff. And for a while, we were all at the same shows together, and it was really cool. And that's what, we could talk about this later, but that's what I kind of hope we're entering into as we move forward through 2024, is more of that bringing everybody back together in these multi-genre parties.
That would be so good, man. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, so tell me if I'm crazy. I wrote this down as like a theory, and I'm not sure if I stand behind it 100% yet. But when I was listening to the Digital Artifice album, I was trying to, one thing I like about that album is it's referential without being stuck in the past. You know what I mean? Like, it's referential and it's fresh at the same time. And here's what I wrote down. Something I thought I heard in it, and I'm going to connect this back to what you were just saying, is I felt like there was a certain element of a Minnesota backpack rap influence. Like a subtle thing that I don't know if I would have picked up on had I not grown up with Minnesota backpack rap. And I don't know. Is
there a song you can point to?
I'd have to go back. I'll see if I can figure it out and send you a message after this, because I'm not going to find it now. But I think it was more.
I think that's just in the genes of Minnesota.
That's my hypothesis here. And the only reason I say that now is because hearing you talk about that community of DJs which show up and kind of positively push each other forward and, challenge each other positively. I'm not sure that every region has that or had that at that time. And just thinking about like the history of Minnesota music and Minnesota backpack rap, which also was kind of a cottage industry for a long time before it really got big, before Atmosphere really blew up, that sort of thing. Like, I bet there was a similar vibe. And I don't know. I wonder if it's something about Minnesota, about Minneapolis, and the history of music culture there that allowed for something like that to happen for you. It's a total pie in the sky theory. It might be wrong, but I don't know.
My gut reaction is that it's a way of what's the word? Oh my gosh, I had it. But basically, it's not LA. People are not trying to like slit throats to get ahead. They're not trying to be super fake. You know what I mean? So I think because Minnesota has a chip on their shoulder about being flyover and stuff like that, maybe there's something to that.
Yeah.
Where it's like, let's share a little bit harder and let's support each other a little more because the stakes are lower. But that would be my gut reaction.
Yeah, I could see that. And I think to answer your question a little more about what influence did I see in the Digital Artifice album, I think what I was really talking about was like there's certain sonic choices like drum sounds or syncopations in certain rhythms. I think that's kind of what it was to me, where I was like, oh, it's just interesting choices that referenced an era of hip hop for me that I feel like a lot of people don't reference. And I'm not saying that was conscious on your part, but I don't know, might be fake, but cool. I picked it out a little bit.
That's cool. I mean, I love boom bap. So
yeah,
there might be some boom bap in there. Boom bap works in the club too, is the thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, obviously trap does too. But I don't know. I like boom bap a lot.
I like both. I think they both work. I mean, and we're getting to a point, there are all these cycles in culture, right? Because I mean, the current era of trap music, like real trap music in 2023, 2024, that's actually kind of hard to play in the club because it got so slow and so unpercussive in a way that, you know, I think the boom bap sound is coming back now. Like even in the big pop songs for rap, it's often more up tempo now. So I don't know. That might be coming back too.
I struggle with the slow stuff, man. I really do. I've always, you know, I don't know that we want to go down the rabbit hole of substances versus genre choices, tastes. But I've always been team caffeine, team stimulant.
Yeah.
I like fast music. I like choppy and all that kind of stuff. I have a hard time. I'm just like, when I'm awake, I'm like going, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like, for a long time in our scene, I would say like, and the scene that I put us in, when I say scene, usually is like sound system dubstep, basically.
Right.
But like sound system underground club. But, you know, I think of like Of the Trees and Lab Group and people of that kind of vibe. And I feel like for a couple of years, the music was getting slower and slower and slower. And now a lot of people are making really cool, like 120 halftime stuff. But at the same time, sometimes I'm just like, I don't know if I can react to this in the club. You know what I mean? Like I lack either the syncopation necessary to speed it up for movements. Like, but it can be really fun to listen to and really impressive and cool. But I think I just need a little bit more shoulder bump or something when it comes out to being out live. And I guess, I don't think we've talked specifically about that for quite a while in Ternion Sound, but you will probably notice that even our slower stuff or things like that, or like we're playing two-step and garage and things now. We're keeping it bouncy. We're emphasizing syncopated rhythms and danciness. You know,
well,
bring back dancing at dance music shows.
Yeah. I mean, was there at the start or later on a conversation of this is what Ternion Sound sounds like, this is what Ternion Sound does not sound like, or was it kind of an unspoken thing of just this is what it sounds like when we work together?
I think I'll start, and then I want to hear Eric's thoughts on this too.
Sure.
But I think the easiest way to parse that is because three of us write music, especially in the beginning. I think we've ironed a lot of this stuff out, and we kind of go naturally now. But it was very like, I made this. Is this Ternion Sound? I made this. Is this Ternion Sound? You know, and it was kind of cool to go through that and kind of chip away. I'll never forget writing like Verify Me and stuff like that, because I was literally, it's so funny. I was writing a song, sending it to Jack and Eric, be like, am I deep enough yet? And they're like, no. And I would send something else.
Make it darker.
I was like, is this right? And they're like, no.
It's not scary enough. It's too happy nostalgia.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
That was for a while.
Yeah.
I think we've always tried to really leave the door open for you know, sonically, like wherever we were going to explore, because you know, it's always been three people, and I feel very lucky that our music taste is similar enough to that's always been something that's crazy to me, is we just seem to enjoy a lot of the same things. So that makes our music, you know, congruent enough to, especially at this point after really kind of ironing out, you know, does this sound like us? We can write something and know, like, this is probably for the project. And then otherwise, like, you know, the album was a real chance for us to, you know, understand all of these different influences that we absolutely love and really enjoy playing to in our sets, and to be able to put our own mark on all, like, you know, a different tempo or a different swing or style. So I don't think we've had a conversation that, you know, intentionally tried to like limit us to like, we make wobbly 140, you know, weird sound design. This is what it is. The parts that we have, you know, put in writing, so to speak, are, we do want to be able to pull influence from classic rave music and from stuff in the past, and then produce it in modern ways and make it sound like us. So that's something that was like a staple of the project, but it's something that doesn't limit us to a genre or a tempo at the same time.
Yeah.
Well, and it seems like recently, I mean, I'm sure since the album came out, but maybe even before then, that at least from an outside perspective, I've seen more attention on you guys. I've seen it building. I've seen the project doing well in general. Do you ascribe that to anything in particular? Is that just the culmination of many years of building it up? Is it something about a cultural moment that we're in? Is it a mindset change that happened with you guys? Like, do you ascribe it to anything in particular?
I try to think about this a lot because I try to think very, very, very businessy. And I've been studying business for a while. And it's gross, but I think it's important to reflect. And even when we're talking about like, what does Ternion Sound sound like, you know, we're not so artistic that we're going to necessarily maybe throw something really left field out at our audience, because we do want to present something that is digestible in a way. Like we're trying to like, I guess I'll go to my other point here essentially is that I think there's a lot of factors into why we are where we are. And we've talked about some of them. Another one is that there was a wave. People were getting sick of bro step. People were getting sick of bad sound systems. I think it's when you have a feeling, you're not alone a lot of times, you know? And we all came together to start this project because we had a lot of big problems we were seeing with current things and we wanted them to change. And guess what? A lot of other people did too. You know what I mean? So I do feel very thankful that we made a switch and we worked really hard on it and came up with cool songs and ideas at the right time, because we were able to ride a wave, which is very important nowadays because of what I keep saying is like the muchness of the world. There's so much. How are you going to get out of everything? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then I think our continued success and growth, which is slow and strong, and I'm impressed by it. You know, I think there's a lot of amazing things going on, but is this dedication to like the reasons we founded, trying to support the scene. And I tell my private lesson students, the way I view social media is like, imagine you're walking down the street and you tap someone on the shoulder and they turn around and they're like, what? And then you say your post. That's how I feel. Like, I want to make sure that every time we post something or every time we release something or every time we interact with somebody, it's worth their time and it's valuable. And I think that's how you build a very strong and dedicated audience over a long period of time. That is not how you grow an audience, but it is how you take the people that already like you and really make sure that they're in the fold, you know? And so it's like constant little changes and adaptations and like trying to figure out what's going on. And so every once in a while we'll do like a little, hey, we exist thing. Like you could even say like Red Rocks plays and stuff are like that. And then at the same time, we're trying really hard to make sure that the people that already like us and stuff like that, we keep giving them something that they're like, I am so glad they did this. That was so worth my time and energy.
That makes total sense. I mean, it makes me also want to mention, you know, you alluded earlier that you're teaching students and production, as well as, I don't know which one of you guys, or maybe it's all of you, does your Patreon, but
we all at some capacity. Yeah.
Sure. So yeah, I mean, as much as you'd like to say about either of those things too, I mean, it's just interesting, the idea of kind of having different levels that people who like what you do can engage on. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think let's talk business for a second. You need to have diversified revenue streams to survive. And like one of our founding principles too is sustainability. We're all lifers. We're not going to stop writing music. We might stop being famous or something, but we're not going to like stop doing art and writing music and stuff like that. So it's like, how can we also make decisions in light of like keep putting gas in the tank and the car moving forward, you know? Yeah. It's just tough. It's a really tough balance. I think most things that you ask us, we have discussed because we talk about things constantly, you know? So it is like the most important thing that we do like in our lives, you know? And so I think it's just interesting and it's very satisfying. to have like the album come out and be received well, to have the fact that I would say we're probably 50% booked for 2024 already. You know, like these are huge things that I don't want to take for granted and things like that. But at the same time, I want to look back and just be like, I'm proud that we put in that time. You know, it's hard. But
yeah, absolutely.
Here's what we get to do with it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if I'd like to give the platform, if you want, for a second, for any, you know, there's a lot of DJs and producers who listen to this. Plug the Patreon for a second.
Yeah. So it's all kind of like a little bit of like a digital media ecosystem. So I'd say like, I kind of think of our Instagram as like the bulletin board and like news. And Eric's mostly looking at that with management. And then on the Twitch side, we've got Ternion Selects, which I think is really important for people to check out if they're interested. If you want to know what tracks we think are hot ahead of time or in real time, it's all right there on Ternion Selects with the track listing. And we try to talk about people's like release dates and stuff like that when it's relevant or when people send us that information.
And that's on
and
Twitch?
Then I stream, twitch.tv.
We stream every other Tuesday.
Yep.
Selects is my bit. And that's basically just, you know, taking influence from a lot of other DJ radio shows. But what I'm trying to do is showcase the things that we think are sick, that, you know, forthcoming releases, just dubs that people send to us. Always want to be an open door too. Like, you know, send us your tunes. Absolutely. I listen to every single thing that people send us. And it gives me great pleasure to run that show. And I think it's a platform for us, and it's also a platform for other people to be seen and recognized and appreciated. So,
yeah, follower count does not matter. Absolutely does not matter. In fact, it could be a hindrance.
Yeah.
It's like you got too many plays. I don't care. And then so I stream production. I'm trying to do it twice a week. And I don't really have a schedule for it right now, but I've been pretty consistent since November now, which is nice. But then, you know, you could subscribe on Twitch. I think you get to watch the VODs for a week or two. And then if you want permanent, and I'm going to say permanent because I don't control Patreon, but you can see all the VODs pretty much ever, almost all of them, if you sign up for our Patreon. And you just kind of have to look through all the posts and stuff like that. But we archive it all. And then there's all of our old Patreon EPs. Is how we survived.
Which is a lot of tunes.
It's like
a lot of tunes.
And then there's like a secret mix archive, which is basically some of our non-published mixes from playing around the United States or around the world. And then there's access to our Discord, which has been simplified, which is nice, to basically you pay, you don't pay tiers. And then you can ask us questions and participate in demo listen tracks where we check out and give you feedback on your tracks and stuff like that. So that's the ecosystem right now. Going to go into YouTube a little more, basically cutting some VODs up maybe, I think, but I don't know. I like our YouTube as this like high value, you're going to watch a really well produced mix of us thing. And I don't really want to mess with it too much. So we'll see.
Also for Patreon, we're going to start releasing Patreon exclusive music again, which seems to be one of the biggest incentives for people to sign up, is to like have music that, you know, doesn't come out on a label. You can sign up and get it. I'm working on trying to get some DJ specific tutorials for Patreon only. Tricks and tips. How do we do this? What are we doing? Going in depth with the equipment and record box, and sort of explaining a lot of details that don't normally get talked about. Still in the works, but hoping to get that online for Patreon as well.
Beautiful. Yeah, I mean that's quite a lot. that's a ton of work. As I used to do a Twitch stream thing and have dabbled in a few of those areas before, and each one of the things you just named is like a full-time job in and of itself.
It really can be. Yeah. Like I'm trying to figure out like getting an editor for cutting VODs and stuff like that, but you still, even when you increase the team, which we actually have a pretty big team now, you know what I mean? Like you still have to come up with a lot of the stuff. You still have to direct a lot of the stuff. And so like until you really, I think it takes like a year to make a good pipeline. Yeah. And so that's just a lot of work.
Oh yeah. And in that year, you'll probably be doing more work than you were before.
Oh, tons.
Right? Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Now it's I'm doing my work and then my work again as I teach somebody to do my work. And then eventually you're just like, come on, pay off. But
yeah, it's all risk reward. You're right. Man. Well, dude, there's so many more things I would love to talk to you guys about. I don't want to use up our whole days here, but I think maybe I'll start wrapping it up by asking, first of all, is there anything we haven't talked about yet? Anything else that's on your mind? Anything else people should know about? Really anything else that you want to get out there before we do wrap it up?
I have a question for you.
Please.
We kind of touched on multi-genreism and a desire for that to become more normal. What do you see as scene zeitgeists right now? And where do you see as we go through 2024, like different waves or different hype things or things that are happening?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I do think from my perspective, there is a bigger appetite for multi-genre something happening right now. I think crowds are maybe a little more open to it. And I think DJs are getting more excited about the idea as well, especially more on the EDM overground side. It felt like for a long time, and maybe this is just like a capitalism thing of like, how can I maximize what I'm doing? But everyone was just so like laser pinpoint focused on one sound and just driving it into the dirt for a few years there.
Totally.
And I do feel like maybe just the artists kind of got bored of that. Maybe, I don't know why, but I do think that's changing a bit. I'm hearing people try some weirder stuff. You are seeing, you know, say a G Jones or something like that, like really breaking through with a diverse, interesting sound that's maybe showing some other people that you don't have to, you know, just do sort of the bass line. Yep. Very bad pun, not intended. But yeah, I don't know. I think there's an appetite for it. I think the UK influence people are starting to get stoked for again. For a while, it felt like not necessarily consciously, but like they were like, no, it's like American. It's got, you know, like the bro step thing for sure. And just like, we don't need to listen to other sources. Like we're fine here. And I feel like, yeah, especially the UK influence, drum and bass, people are super stoked about again. So I'm optimistic, but I also think it's so much chaos that I can't tell. Like, I'm not going to say like, oh, it's definitely going to be better now, you know?
Yeah, of course.
I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I hope that multi-genreism is coming back. And I think that talking about, just real quick about the metagames, beginning, middle, late, however far late goes, I don't even really know, you know what I mean? I feel like we now have some influence. And so we're trying to put our money where our mouth is. And that's kind of like how we're building tours now and stuff too. And it's scary, but I think it's rewarding. And like, there's certain audiences and certain scenes. You know, every artist has like a window of the scene or a slice of the scene or something like that. And I think most of the time our audience is very accepting of a lot of really interesting ideas. So yeah, I mean, and it's up to us to not just play house for a second. You know what I mean? Like we're not just bandwagoning,
right?
You know what I mean? So like we go down Bandcamp rabbit holes. We're finding all this music. I am rejecting most of what I hear. What I'm choosing to send you or show you something, it's still Ternion Sound. And that's what my old mix show used to be. It was the Monday mix show. It was everything except dubstep. And what I was trying to do is open my own mind and the viewers' minds and stuff like that to being like, this is 190 BPM psytrance with an anime vocal on top of it. Like, there are things we can grab from this. And if nothing else, this is just entertaining right now, isn't it? You know, and it's like less pressure on Twitch. So I don't know. I'm seeing that kind of happen. But at the same time, I think people with positions of influence far beyond ours too, they can make really interesting choices. And I hope that they make choices that embolden the scene in healthy ways.
Yeah. I think there's something in, like, a lot of times I just sort of hope that I can get people to see things the way that I see them. because I feel like you guys are the same, where in my brain, I see the connections between these sounds and these styles, and putting one next to the other in an artful way. Like it's very obvious to me that it makes sense and can be done well. But I realize, of course, not everyone can see what's happening in my brain or listen to music the same way I listen to it. I'm no more right than anyone else. And so for me, that's part of it too, is like, you know, like we were saying earlier, your brother, Eric, was like doing happy hardcore and drum and bass and all that. I was obsessed with happy hardcore. That's what got me into dance music when I was a kid. And I still love it to this day. There's something about taking silliness seriously that like
totally.
There's something about that idea that I think plays into what we're talking about here, where it's like I think some people are a little too self-serious about what they're doing, to the point that it excludes other cool ideas, or maybe there's an ego in it, or they're like, it's too wrapped up in their own identity, where they're like, oh, if I tried this, then I wouldn't be me anymore, or that kind of thing. And I don't know, I don't know how to encourage people to not do that, but it is. I think about that a lot, where it's just like, it's not quite as simple. It's just being like, everyone needs to loosen up, but there's a certain amount of that where it's like, all right, we're not all like rock stars here. Like, let's experiment a little.
We're nerds at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Actually, too, when you're talking about an audience, let's say they have a weekly, the weekly becomes part of their identity, I would say, in a lot of ways. And we're not expecting our audience. It's an interesting thought, actually. We do actually expect our audience to do a little research. But you can't really generally do that.
No.
You know, like they have a regular life with regular things to be concerned about. And this show that they're going to isn't necessarily as important to them as it is to the artists and stuff like that. So you got to have like checked expectations. But I also want to respect. I think there has to be some respect there too. You know what I mean? So it's like, when we do different genre sets, we want to make sure that that's clear. And sometimes we've done 2-night sets and it maybe hasn't been as clear as we wanted and things like that. And we feel bad. And it's not like we're just like, we're going to play shit that you better like, right? Like we want to set up an expectation and meet it and stuff like that, so that there's like understanding and it's presented well, just like the sound system. You know, it really fractals out. And that's what makes this so difficult too. Well, because you can just keep thinking harder and harder about it. And eventually you do have to just like do something.
Well, I would say, I think one really great way to do it, and maybe we can kind of wrap up bringing it back to this, is the Digital Artifice album, and insisting that it is a mixed piece of work and that the one transitions into the next, and having your audience consume it in that way, I think prepares people to accept that in a live format. I think it helps make the connections if you're sitting at home listening to it. And then when you go out and you see it done in the live setting, you're like, oh, I get it. Like, this is what they were trying to do. This was, you know, sort of the example they were giving. I think that's one way to do it really well, man. And I think it's a good note for any up and coming artist too, because there's always a lot of hair pulling of like, well, how do I define my sound? How do I stand out? That kind of thing. Yeah. But sometimes the way to do that is to be diverse and to really drive that home, you know?
Yeah. I students ask me constantly, like, what's my sound? I need to find my sound, blah, 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 and stuff like that. And I usually just say, make choices. Your choices are you know.
but make intentional choices, right? Like try to understand why you made the choices you made, and see if
the journey. It's all fun until my students say, "All right, let's talk about logos and launching my Instagram. And then I just cry because I'm just like, oh, the fun part ended. You're a business now. Aw.
Baby bird is leaving the nest.
That's right.
Oh.
That's right. It's a bittersweet moment. Yeah.
Andrew cries at the doorway and waves. And, you know.
Every day at school.
You're an empty nester. That's a great.
Yeah, man. It's tough.
Oh,
Oh, my
man.
God.
Well, dude, this has been super fun. You guys are like the best podcast guests of all time. Anytime you want to come back and do this, man, this was great. I really like talking to you guys.
Nice. Thanks.
Thank you so much, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
Glad our overthinking is worth something, you know?
Oh,
Yes.
it absolutely is, man. Well, because you got to imagine, you know, I talk to people all over the spectrum, and sometimes, you know, I'll go on like ask a 2-minute question and then kind of trail off, and then there's just silence, and then it's like, yeah, I don't know, you know.
I don't know. That's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair.
But no, this was a treat. It's really nice to meet you guys. Love seeing Minnesota boys doing good. That's it. Any final thoughts?
It's pretty good on my end.
I think Jack would have a lot of fun here too. We got to get him on the next
I
one.
really
The
want.
next one.
Yeah, I had some more political notes and questions, but I figure I'll save that for when he's here.
Perfect.
Yeah.
He'll eat him up.
I tell Jack every once in a while, like, I'm just like, I can't be your spokesperson. I can't remember everything.
No.
I love it, man. Well, hey, thank you guys so much, man. I hope you have a great rest of your days. I appreciate this.
You too.
All right.
Later, man.
Thanks so much. Yeah,
Take
we'll be
care,
in touch.
guys. Peace.